Hello, Rosie here. This poem and deep dive podcast are of a work by my friend, the Phantom Texter. It goes without saying. The holidays are a bad time for a lot of us. There will be bookmarks in the descriptions. Be safe. Be well.
Dear Lord, I don't always understand my pain. I've lived a long time and didn't validate my pain. I've got my pain wrong sometimes. I spend a good amount of time letting others tell me of my pain. All of those mistakes have always led me back to my pain.
A lifetime of supposed to be's, should be's, and must be's surround me like the walls of a box canyon, and I'm trapped with the army of self-righteous, arrogant, indignation, callous, cruel, well-meaning, and deceit have come for me time and time again.
It has been their history to raid my settlement of its peace. But this time, there is no peace for them to scavenge, only my pain. And they claim they have enough of that. To quote an old Negro spiritual, everybody wants to sing my blues. Nobody wants to live my blues.
I document my pain. I relive my pain in the vain attempt to understand it. I may not ever understand it, but I will not deny it. I will face it. I will let it wash over me until it is gone. But it is an ocean, and it will take time. Dear Lord, will you grant me the time for the wash? I do so very much want to see you once I'm clean.
If you made it this far, thank you. If you go further, bless you. Now we've come to the deep dive. This writing was a deeply personal prayer where James grappled with a lifetime of unvalidated and misunderstood pain. Ultimately, James expressed a commitment to documenting, facing, and accepting this overwhelming pain. Again, be safe, be well, become clean.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something a little different, something that's unlike almost any other exploration we've done before.
Yeah, this one is unique.
We aren't sifting through, stacks of economic data or military histories.
No spreadsheets today.
No. Our source material is a single document. It's intensely personal, deeply reflective. It's called Dear Lord, the Phantom Texter's Prayer, and it was written by James Ray in December 2025.
And it really is, at its core, a raw internal monologue. But it's framed as a prayer.
That framing is so important, isn't it?
It's absolutely key. The mission here, for us, isn't to dissect external facts. It's to really deeply unpack the author's internal landscape. We're looking at his philosophy of suffering, his ultimate spiritual resolution.
So how should you, our listener, think about this document?
Think of it as a kind of compressed map. It's a distillation of these incredibly complex human experiences. We're talking pain, validation, acceptance, and it's all articulated with these striking metaphors and this incredible urgency.
So it's a shortcut?
In a way, yes. It's a shortcut to understanding a very specific, very profound journey through suffering.
And what stands out to me, just right from the jump, is how the entire piece orbits the author's relationship with his own pain, his own, persistent pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's really an admission of a lifelong failure, isn't it? He talks about how he misjudged it, how he allowed all these outside forces to define it for him.
And then the pivot, the resolution.
Exactly. His current, and I think very courageous decision to just face it head on completely, and this is the key part, without any promise of actually understanding it.
It's the ultimate move away from avoidance.
Yeah.
I mean, it captures that critical human moment, when all the strategies we use to manage, to minimize, to intellectualize our suffering, they just collapse.
Right, when outsourcing the problem just doesn't work anymore.
When the labels don't stick, you're just left staring at the undeniable reality of the suffering itself. And the way he starts this whole thing with that radical honesty of, I don't always understand my pain, that's where our deep dive has to begin.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack that opening confession and get into our first theme. Defining and misdefining personal pain, coming straight from that very first paragraph. Hashtag tag D, hashtag Y. Defining and misdefining personal pain. So that opening line, I don't always understand my pain, it creates this immediate common ground, doesn't it?
It really does.
It sets a tone of such vulnerability, acknowledging that, internal suffering is rarely neat. It's not logical or linear.
Exactly. It resists that easy, one-size-fits-all diagnostic label that we're so desperate for sometimes.
We want to put it in a box.
We want to put it in a box. And he's saying right from the start, this doesn't fit in a box.
Yeah.
And it forces us, you and I and the listener, to recognize that subjective truth is often so much more confusing than objective fact.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you say you don't understand your pain, what you're really admitting is that the sensation is real. It's demanding. But the narrative, the why of it all, that remains elusive.
I see. So the feeling is undeniable, but the story behind it is a mess.
Precisely. And that immediately positions this text as a document that's exploring reality over, say, rationality.
And right after he admits this current state of confusion, he gives us the historical context for why he's so confused. He says, I've lived a long time and didn't validate my pain. That feels like a profoundly important admission.
Oh, it's critical. It is absolutely critical because it tells us the pain wasn't, a sudden thing. It wasn't an acute injury.
Right, it's chronic, a long-term companion.
A long-term companion that was never given the courtesy of legitimacy. And validation in this context, it's not about finding a cause or even a solution.
It's just acknowledging it's there.
It's about acknowledging the right of the feeling to exist. To live a long time without validating your pain, that means you spent decades, literally decades, in a state of self-betrayal.
Self-betrayal, that's a strong word.
But I think it's accurate. You're constantly treating a fundamental part of your internal reality as if it's trivial or maybe unworthy of space and attention.
Which, psychologically, that must require an immense amount of internal friction. You're dedicating so much mental energy just to fighting yourself.
That's it. You're trying to maintain this facade of, resilience or normalcy.
While inside
you're simultaneously experiencing the suffering and demanding that the experience stop.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're demanding that it's illegitimate. As I said before, it's an active campaign of self-gaslighting.
And the consequences of that kind of denial, they have to be enormous.
Enormous. If you don't validate your own pain, you are, in effect, cutting off your body's internal alarm system. That leads to chronic stress and often, eventually, a massive psychic breakdown when the system just finally fails.
So you think the severity of the pain that he talks about later in the text?
I think it's likely compounded. It's compounded by the sheer duration of its denial. It's the pain plus the interest accrued over decades of neglect.
But I have to ask, if the pain is truly an ocean, as he calls it later, isn't it a necessary short-term coping mechanism?
That's a great question.
Is he advocating for radical honesty from day one? Or is he just acknowledging that denial, however necessary it seemed, eventually just fails?
I think it's the latter. I think the text is acknowledging the failure of denial, rather than prescribing some kind of immediate, perfect honesty from the start.
Okay.
Denial is a common coping strategy. It's a temporary psychological shield. But the author's perspective here, writing in 2025, it's all retrospective. He's looking back.
He survived it.
He has survived the denial phase, and now he's counting the cost. Yep. He's essentially saying, the temporary peace I thought I found in denial, it ultimately cost me decades of honest self-engagement.
And the pain just grew in the dark.
It compounded in the shadows. He realizes that the shield, in the long run, it didn't protect him, it trapped him.
And that failure to engage, it leads him right to the next admission. He says, I've got my pain wrong sometimes. He's talking about failed attempts at labeling it.
Absolutely. When the pain is unvalidated, what do? We scramble for external labels to try and contain this big, messy feeling.
We want to find a box for it.
We attempt to fit the experience into a pre-existing box. I'll call it stress so I can manage it with a vacation.
Or it's just burnout, it's my job.
It's burnout so I can explain it with work. Or it's anxiety so I can treat it with a pill. But if the root is deeper, if the pain is, say, existential or tied to unacknowledged trauma,
then those labels are just wrong.
They're simply incorrect or misplaced. They don't fit.
So he was trying to use a framework that was way too small for the suffering he was actually experiencing. And the text seems to suggest these repeated attempts were, they were ultimately destructive.
They were. They were indeed destructive, because each wrong label led him further away from an authentic confrontation with the real issue.
It's like taking the wrong road over and over.
It is. If you keep misdiagnosing, you keep applying the wrong cure, which only reinforces the failure. You end up feeling not just the original pain, but failure on top of that pain, because you couldn't even manage to correctly identify what was happening to you.
And this is where we see the transition. He goes from his own internal errors to looking at external influences.
Yes.
The author introduces this really critical turning point. I spend a good amount of time letting others tell me of my pain.
And this moves the whole analysis into a deep social critique. Why would you outsource the definition of your own intrinsically private, subjective suffering?
Desperation.
Often it's just that,
Yeah.
desperation. If our own internal mechanisms for validation have failed us, we look externally for some kind of authority.
You want someone to tell you it's okay to feel this way.
We seek permission to hurt, or we seek a definitive explanation from a friend, a partner, a professional. Anyone will finally neutralize the feeling. We surrender our internal experience to an external narrator.
And the danger of that external narration is that other people are defining your suffering based on their needs, not yours.
Exactly. When others define your pain, they apply their own filters, their own biases, their own capacity for empathy or lack thereof onto your experience.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure, a society that, say, prioritizes productivity might define your suffering as laziness. A friend who can't handle emotional weight might define it as attention-seeking.
So they're defining it in a way that's easier for them to manage.
Precisely. Or in a way that keeps you contained within the boundaries they find comfortable.
The result, as the author realized, is this profound disconnect from himself. And the irony is, it's brutal. By seeking clarity from other people, he only made his own self-understanding murkier.
It creates a hall of mirrors. You end up trying to live up to someone else's definition of your pain, which is an impossible task.
How so?
Well, if they say your pain should be solved by, I don't know, exercise, and you try to exercise and it doesn't work,
Then you feel like a failure.
you feel like a failure, not just for having the pain in the first place, but for failing to conform to the required cure. The external narration becomes a second layer of suffering right on top of the first.
So whether the mistake was his own internal denial or outsourcing it to others, the path just kept circling back. He closes this whole reflection with that unavoidable truth. All of those mistakes have always led me back to my pain.
The pain itself is the great constant.
The one thing he couldn't escape.
The pain then becomes the ultimate anchor of reality. It's the teacher that keeps showing up, no matter how many detours he takes. Every attempt to define it, to escape it, to rationalize it, to outsource it, it all failed.
So this realization is foundational.
It has to be. When all your strategies of avoidance and definition fail, the only remaining option is this kind of radical acceptance. The pain stops being a problem to be solved and becomes an inescapable, demanding reality to be faced.
And that transition from being defined by failure to being defined by acceptance, that led us right into the pressure chamber of the next section.
Right into the box canyon.
Which is the immediate consequence of realizing the pain is inescapable, but you're still surrounded by the world's rules. Let's look at that feeling of confinement. Hashtag tag 2. The confinement of expectations and the army of judgment. The imagery of confinement he uses here is, it's stunningly vivid. He describes this lifetime of conditional living.
It's powerful.
A lifetime of supposed to be's, should be's, and must be's surround me like the walls of a box canyon, and I'm trapped. That desperation is so visceral because we all recognize those voices.
We do. And it's a devastating picture of psychic confinement. It gives us a much deeper understanding of why he couldn't validate his own pain in the first place.
Because it didn't fit the mold.
It didn't fit.
Yeah.
These walls, you have to understand, they aren't made of stone. They are the expectations, the norms, the obligations that society or family or even the author himself internalized as necessary for an acceptable life.
They create a kind of hierarchy of obligation.
A hierarchy that results in complete immobility. You're paralyzed.
Let's actually, let's dissect that hierarchy, because I think it's important to get the different psychological weights of those three phrases. What's the real difference between being supposed to be something and must be something?
That's a great distinction to make. The supposed to be's, I think, often represent the most superficial, the social roles.
Okay.
These are the external pressures of image. How a person of your age or your career path or social group should appear to the outside world.
Like what?
Like, you're supposed to look happy in photos. You're supposed to own a house by a certain age. You're supposed to have a marketable hobby. This is the pressure to conform, externally to the Instagram life.
And when you fail at that,
When you fail this, you face judgment, But the failure is usually just social. It's on the surface.
So the should-bes must go deeper then.
Yes. The should-bes are the internalized moral or ethical imperatives. This is the voice of the superego, and it's often rooted in early life lessons or cultural dogma. This is the layer that generates guilt.
So it's more personal.
Much more. You should be more grateful. You should manage your money better. You should never waste an opportunity. This layer is the most personally punishing because it's the voice of self-critique. It's the internal moral tyrant telling the author his suffering is a result of his own moral shortcomings.
And then you have the must-bes. These feel like the heaviest of all.
They are. Those are the existential obligations. These are the burdens of purpose, legacy, or essential identity that the author feels are non-negotiable, but at the moment are completely unattainable.
Like, I must find my calling.
I must find my calling. I must leave a legacy. I must be strong for my family. And when all three of those layers, the superficial supposed to be, the moral should be, and the existential must be, when they all converge,
It's overwhelming.
they don't just create pressure, they create an airtight psychological prison. The author has absolutely no breathing room.
And that prison is the Box Canyon. It's such a precise metaphor for the state he's in.
It perfectly symbolizes a dead end. Geographically, a box canyon means you can walk in, but the walls are sheer and unscalable, and there is no exit.
It reinforces that sense of futility.
Completely. Every step you take, every effort you make, it just circles you back to where you started, but the frustration is amplified by the echo.
And there's another layer to that metaphor too, right? The visual of it.
I think so. Think about the visual contrast.
Yeah.
You have these natural, overwhelming, massive rock walls that were defined by millions of years of geological pressure. And that mirrors the lifelong, immense pressure of the expectations placed on the author.
So the confinement feels absolute.
It feels absolute and geological in its scale. He is trapped in a place defined by unyielding obligation.
But the suffering isn't just this internal architectural thing. The next section immediately introduces an active external threat. He calls it the army that has come for him.
Yes,
This elevates the struggle from, a personal neurosis to an external conflict.
it does. This army is the collective physical and I'd say vocal manifestation of the expectations that form the Box Canyon walls.
So it's the voices of the shoulds and musts made real.
It's the collection of voices, judgments, and behaviors that are preventing the author from finding any internal space or acknowledging his pain honestly. And what makes this army so compelling is the complex, almost contradictory list of its components.
Right, let's analyze these, what he calls the 7 faces of judgment. Starting with the forces that judge from this place of perceived moral high ground: self-righteous, arrogant, indignation.
These are the forces of moralizing. They don't just disagree with the author's current state, they judge it as a moral failing.
So they're not trying to help.
Not at all. The self-righteousness provides them with an infallible platform. The arrogance provides the contemptuous delivery. And the indignation provides the righteous anger that fuels the whole attack.
So what's their goal?
Their goal is not to help him navigate his suffering. It's to stand above the Box Canyon and lecture him on the poor life choices that they believe led him there. They invalidate his pain by implying it's deserved. It's a punishment for failing to adhere to their perfect standards.
They weaponize morality against someone who's suffering.
That's exactly what they do. And then you have the next layer, which is simpler, but maybe more direct. Callous, cruel.
This sounds like just simple malice.
It is. This is the force that either ignores suffering or actively inflicts harm purely out of indifference or spite. This force doesn't care about moral rules. It just thrives on the perceived weakness of the author.
It's just a rejection of basic kindness.
The total rejection of his humanity. The judgment here isn't based on a code of conduct. It's based on a complete lack of regard for him as a person.
But then we get to the critical and maybe the most psychologically damaging inclusion in this army of judgment.
The well-meaning.
The well-meaning. This feels so counterintuitive.
We really need to break this one down, because this is where the most subtle and perhaps most painful harm occurs. The well-meaning are dangerous, precisely because their intentions are good.
They don't want to hurt him.
No, but they are terrified of witnessing unresolved suffering. They can't stand it. They are part of the army because they refuse to simply witness the pain without minimizing it or trying to fix it instantly.
So how does that refusal to just sit with the pain turn into judgment?
Well, it manifests as invalidation disguised as advice. The well-meaning often approach this kind of complex oceanic suffering with really simplistic platitudes.
Just look on the bright side.
Just look on the bright side. Things could be worse. You just need to get out more.
Because they cannot tolerate the ambiguity and the depth of the author's pain, they try to quickly reduce it to a manageable problem with an easy solution.
And if the author can't accept that easy solution, or it doesn't work,
then the well-meaning person becomes frustrated. They conclude that the author must be clinging to their pain or that they're being willfully difficult. So the good intention sours.
it turns sour and it manifests as judgment. Well, we gave you the answer and you refused to take it, therefore you deserve to be trapped. They are perhaps the most insidious part of the army, because their actions, which were intended as help, end up reinforcing the feeling of isolation and disconnect.
They strengthen the Box Canyon walls.
Through inadvertent denial. And the final piece of this army is deceit.
What does he mean by that?
Deceit refers to the forces of manipulation or falsehood, both internal and external. This is what obscures the author's truth, and it enables the external narrators and the moralizers to gain control.
So it could be betrayal.
It could be outright betrayal, but I think more often, it's the pervasive societal falsehood that suggests an acceptable life is one that's free of this kind of profound, messy suffering. And that falsehood is the ground upon which the rest of the army builds its entire encampment.
And the history of this army is important too. He says, "It has been their history to raid my settlement of peace." This isn't a one-time battle, it's a chronic war.
The language of raid is so specific. It suggests a pattern of sudden, violent incursions, and they're aimed at looting the author's internal resources.
His settlement of peace.
Exactly. The author tries to establish this fragile, temporary state of internal stability, a settlement, but the army consistently identifies and attacks that stability. They don't just judge him, they actively destroy his capacity for inner tranquility.
What are they trying to get from him?
They're looking to extract something. Maybe it's affirmation of their own moral superiority, or maybe it's the dramatic story of his struggle, or maybe it's just his compliance.
But he says that this time, the rules of the game have changed. He has nothing left for the raiders to take.
Right.
And that leads us directly into this massive shift in his perspective in the third section. Ownership, documentation, and the blues. Hashtag tax third. Ownership, documentation, and the blues. So the current state he describes is one of depletion. He's on the defensive, and he notes, but this time there is no peace for them to scavenge. Only my pain. The army has arrived, and the vault is just empty.
And this is a devastating, yet I think a strategically crucial position for him to be in. The external forces they previously relied on disrupting his peace.
That's what they fed on.
But now that peace is already gone. It's depleted. There's no contentment, no stability, no joy for them to destroy or envy or exploit. The only thing left is the raw, difficult reality of the pain itself.
Which he now owns completely.
Entirely. The author has hit an emotional rock bottom, and the only resource he has remaining is his own misery.
And how does the army react to this misery? The text says, and they claim they have enough of that.
They reject it. This is a moment of profound abandonment. The self-righteous and the well-meaning, they were happy to stand by and watch him struggle as long as they could define the terms of that struggle.
So long as they were in control.
But when they're confronted with the sheer volume and the reality of the pain, this resource that cannot be categorized or solved quickly, they retreat. They were eager to participate in the spectacle of suffering, but not the substance.
That line, they have enough of that, it's so dismissive.
It shows their exhaustion. It shows their unwillingness to bear witness any further.
And their action, this rejection of his pain, ironically, it leaves him completely alone with the very thing he now has to face. It forces a complete solitary ownership.
Exactly. If the world is unwilling to live the pain with him, he has to live it alone. And this shift in ownership is just perfectly captured by the powerful cultural quotation that he uses immediately after.
Yes, the direct quote, which is so steeped in historical and cultural weight. To quote an old Negro spiritual, everybody wants to sing my blues. Nobody wants to live my blues. This feels like the very heart of the social critique in this text.
It is.
It's highlighting this massive gulf between, sympathy and true empathy.
We have to pause here and give this quotation its proper cultural weight. The blues is not just sad music. It is an entire art form rooted in profound suffering, systemic hardship, and the chronic resilience of African American history. It provides a cultural structure for voicing this deep-seated, often generational reality.
So in this context, the blues represents his deepest, most authentic, unavoidable suffering.
I believe so. And if the blues represents the substance of his suffering, then the contrast between singing it and living it becomes incredibly sharp.
Let's break that down. What does it mean to sing the blues?
To sing the blues means to appropriate the aesthetic aspects of suffering. The story, the drama, the catharsis, the momentary performance of sympathy. It's a very low-cost emotional engagement.
You can just dip your toe in.
You can listen to the story, nod your head, offer a platitude, and then you walk away, feeling cleansed by the spectacle. But to live the blues, that means enduring the constant, daily, high-cost reality of that hardship.
It's not a performance.
It is the existential weight that informs every single decision and every moment. It's the chronic state that never, ever goes away.
This so beautifully encapsulates the failure of the well-meaning part of the army.
It really does.
They wanted to sing his blues, to participate superficially in his suffering, but they ran when they realized they were being asked to engage with the reality of living it.
It's that realization that people are often eager to be near the idea of suffering. You know, the moral lesson it might teach, the opportunity to offer advice. But they flee from the actual messy, relentless experience of it.
And this observation, this recognition of all that superficiality, that's what finally compels him to turn inward.
Completely inward. If society only wants the spectacle, then the author has to preserve the substance for himself. And that leads him to the determined act of documentation.
He states, "I document my pain. I relive my pain in the vain attempt to understand it." Documentation here is an active process, isn't it? It's like he's creating an internal archive.
It is an act of intellectual and emotional defiance. It's defiance against denial and against external definition. After spending a lifetime letting others define his pain, he is taking back the narrative authority.
He's becoming his own historian.
Yes. Documentation is the active, disciplined process of engaging with the experience. He's ensuring that even if the origin remains murky, the reality of the suffering is recorded, chronicled, and validated by the primary source himself.
And this action, it also places the text within a long historical tradition, doesn't it? The documentation of one's internal experience.
Absolutely. I mean, think of confessional literature, historical diaries, or even the modern practice of keeping a trauma journal. These acts of documentation are a means of asserting subjective truth against a world that demands objective evidence.
He's compiling his own evidence.
He's compiling his own proof that his experience is real and valid, regardless of whether he or anyone else can intellectually solve it. He's archiving the truth of the territory, even if he cannot understand the map.
But why does he call it a vain attempt to understand it? That word vain feels so important.
Vain implies futility. It suggests the author recognizes the limits of his own rational mind. He's tried before to intellectualize, to label, to solve the experience, and he has failed.
So he knows it's a fool's errand.
He knows that a true, satisfying intellectual grasp. He even says, "I may not ever understand it," may be unattainable because the suffering is too deep or too existential or too rooted in unrecoverable history. He recognizes the fundamental difference between the intellectual map and the experiential territory.
Understanding is the map, living it is the territory.
And the documentation is focused on recording the terrain, not on making the map perfect.
But that failed attempt at understanding, that leads to the crucial commitment. This feels like the pivot of the entire piece.
It is.
But I will not deny it, I will face it.
This is the moment of breakthrough. This is the transformation from a passive victim to an active participant in his own reality. He stops striving for intellectual comprehension and commits entirely to emotional confrontation.
And the documentation is the tool that makes that possible.
It's essential because it makes denial impossible. By forcing himself to relive and record the experience, he is setting the internal record straight. The ultimate resolution is that refusal to deny. He's choosing reality over comfort, even if that reality is terrifying.
And facing that reality so fully means he has to stop struggling against it. Which leads us to the terrifying state of acceptance.
It is terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying because acceptance means surrendering control. Once you decide to stop running and stop denying, the next logical step isn't defined by intellectual striving. It's defined by physical, metaphoric endurance. Hashtag TAC5E. The ocean, the wash, and the plea for time.
And in this last section, that definitive decision is laid out so clearly, I will let it wash over me until it is gone.
This signifies the shift from active resistance to a kind of passive, conscious endurance.
So the pain is no longer an enemy.
It's no longer a riddle to be solved or an enemy to be defeated. It's been recast as this vast, powerful natural force. And by allowing a passive authority, the author is committing to experiencing the pain fully.
Believing that's the only way through.
Believing that only through full acknowledgement and total immersion can it eventually dissipate. This is the core philosophy of surrender. You endure the cleansing process, believing that the pain, having been fully absorbed and acknowledged, will finally release its grip.
It sounds almost like a meditative state, a complete immersion in the present sensation, no matter how difficult that sensation is.
It's very much aligned with psychological concepts like radical acceptance, where you stop battling the reality of the present moment. The struggle, so often, lies not in the pain itself, but in our internal resistance to the pain.
Second layer of suffering.
Exactly. By saying, I will let it wash over me, the author is removing the resistance. He's stripping it all away, leaving only the primary experience. And this choice, this decision to stop fighting, is framed as the only path toward eventual cessation.
But he immediately corrects the scale of this commitment, which feels vital. He says, but it is an ocean, and it will take time.
That correction is profoundly important. It's what differentiates his suffering from, temporary sadness.
A simple wash is one thing.
A simple wash implies a quick, manageable rinse. But an ocean implies vastness, overwhelming depth, and this unstoppable, relentless momentum. He's admitting the sheer scale of the internal reservoir of suffering that has accumulated over a lifetime of denial and misdefinition.
So how does acknowledging the oceanic nature of the pain change the nature of the wash itself?
Well, if the pain is an ocean, then the wash is no quick bath. It's the slow, grinding process of erosion. It's being subjected to massive, relentless tides over and over and over.
So it requires monumental endurance.
Monumental. And this shift in scale is what validates the necessity of his final request. He's realized that facing the pain isn't a single courageous act. It's a sustained, years-long endeavor, and it requires a kind of patience that he may not naturally possess.
And that need for endurance, that recognition of the time required, that brings us to the emotional climax of the whole piece.
The final prayer.
This deeply moving final prayer, his concluding request. Dear Lord, will you grant me the time for the wash? I do so very much want to see you once I'm clean.
This is the central plea. It's spiritual, it's existential. And notice, he is not asking for immediate relief.
Right, that would be the opposite of the acceptance he just committed to.
He is asking for the resource necessary to complete the process he has started. The plea for time is a prayer for longevity, for patience, and for the strength to endure this monumental wash until the suffering is genuinely processed and gone.
He recognizes that healing from an ocean is not an instant thing, and he needs external, maybe divine support just to make it through the sheer duration of it.
Exactly. He's asking for sustained grace to maintain his commitment to reality. And then we have to analyze that final word he uses, clean. What does clean truly imply in this context?
It can't just mean the pain is gone, can it? That feels too simple.
No, I don't think so. Clean here implies purification on multiple levels. It is a state purified not just of the pain itself, but perhaps more importantly, purified of all the historical baggage.
All the misdefinitions.
The mistakes in judgment, the misdefinitions, the external influences of the army, and the lifelong armor of denial that he wore. It's a purification of the self. It's about restoring the essential, untainted core that was lost or obscured inside that box canyon of expectations.
So the process of the wash is about removing this crust of denial and external influence, allowing his true, authentic self to finally emerge.
That's the idea. And the desire to see the Lord is conditional upon completing this arduous process of emotional and psychological cleansing.
He has to do the work first.
It suggests that the accumulated suffering and misdirection obscured his vision. So true spiritual or existential clarity, therefore, is not found through an intellectual understanding of the pain, but through the courage to fully endure its oceanic reality until it passes through him.
So the wash is not just an ending of suffering.
No. He sees it as a necessary purification for ultimate connection and clarity.
This journey, all mapped out in a single prayer, is just extraordinary. James Ray begins in confusion and denial, trapped by these societal expectations. And he realizes the futility of outsourcing his suffering. He learns that the world only wants to sing his blues, but never to live them.
A painful but necessary realization.
Then he pivots to this radical ownership, documenting his pain as an act of non-denial. And finally, he commits to surrendering to his suffering, allowing it to wash over him like an inevitable, consuming ocean.
Knowing that this endurance is the only path.
The only path to ultimate cleansing and spiritual peace.
It's a transformation from a state that was defined by avoidance to a state that's defined by courageous surrender. The core insight he leaves us with is that while we may strive for intellectual understanding, that vain attempt he talked about, the refusal to deny pain is the infinitely more powerful and ultimately regenerative act.
Documentation affirms reality.
And acceptance provides the path forward.
A deeply complex and moving articulation of human suffering and resilience. I mean, it really does serve as a true shortcut for understanding the transformation that occurs when someone just decides to stop fighting reality.
Indeed. And for you, the listener, to carry forward from this deep dive, maybe consider this paradox.
Okay.
If the author has explicitly moved beyond the vain attempt to understand and has committed instead to acceptance, to the oceanic wash, why does he still engage in the painstaking active process of documentation?
That's a great question. Why keep writing it down if you've accepted it?
Is documenting the pain merely an affirmation of reality? Or is it the critical discipline mechanism that sustains acceptance, preventing him from slipping back into the self-deceit of denial while he waits for the ocean to recede?
So is the fight over, or has it just changed form?
Exactly. As the fight shifted from battling the pain to chronicling the endurance, that is the profound thought we'll leave you with today.
A compelling paradox to consider. Thank you for guiding us through this challenging but ultimately redemptive text.